They say some money is so dirty, even the government won't touch it. March 1972, in the quiet coastal town of Laguna Niguel, California, something sinister was brewing beneath the hum of everyday life. A small bank nestled between strip mall storefronts looked like any other, but inside its steel vault lay something almost mythic: tens of millions in off-the-books cash, rumored to be directly connected to the most powerful man in the free world, President Richard Nixon. And one man had the audacity not just to find it, but to steal it. Emil Dencio was not your average thief. Born in the rusted outskirts of Youngstown, Ohio, where opportunity came only to those who took it by force, he built his criminal reputation like a craftsman. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but by 1972, he was known across state lines as a ghost who slipped in and out of vaults without a trace. If money was hiding, Dencio would find it. And that year, he received the tip of a lifetime from none other than Jimmy Hoffa himself. Yes, that Jimmy Hoffa, the notorious Teamsters president, the man with one hand in the labor union and the other wrapped tightly around organized crime. Hoffa was bitter. Once one of Nixon's top supporters and donors, he'd fallen out of favor. He wanted revenge and his money back. A private safe deposit box in a sleepy California bank supposedly held $3 million of his personal donation. And according to Hoffa's people, that was just a fraction of the total stash. The full treasure, estimated at $30 million. Slush fund money, campaign cash, and shady payoffs Nixon couldn't afford to report. Dencio didn't ask too many questions. All he saw was a jackpot and a job that could go down as the most daring heist in U.S. history. But what no one knew, yet not Hoffa, not the bank, not even the FBI, was that this crew of outlaws would soon trigger the largest manhunt since the JFK assassination. Dencio knew he couldn't do this alone, but instead of hiring outsiders, he turned to people he could trust, people who shared his blood. First, he brought in his younger brother James, who had a quiet sharpness to him, then his nephew Harry Barber, and his brother-in-law Chuck Mulligan. That was the core. But for a job this big, he needed more. So he reached out to an old friend from Cleveland, Phil Christopher, a skilled thief who came with his own wild card, Charlie Brokel, a volatile man with just enough brilliance to be dangerous. As the crew assembled, Dencio told them about the vault, the money, the security or lack thereof. But there was one detail he kept to himself. He didn't tell them the money belonged to the President of the United States. Only 3 people knew the real truth: Emil, his brother James, and Chuck. They were the ones who would take the lion's share. After laundering the money, paying Hoffa his cut, and breaking bread with the crew, the math was simple: $8 million each for the trio. More than they could spend in a lifetime if they could get away with it. The first move was transporting their tools. Everything needed to crack the vault had to be smuggled into California without raising suspicion torches. Dynamite, drills, sandbags. For that, Dencio relied on his girlfriend, who agreed to drive cross-country with the equipment, while the crew flew into Los Angeles under their real names, a decision that would later haunt them. Once in town, they needed eyes on the bank. They rented a condo on a golf course just half a mile from the target. From its roof, they had a direct line of sight to the United California Bank. It was perfect. They even bought an old 1962 Oldsmobile with a massive trunk to all the gear registered to a fake name. Naturally, they studied the bank for days. Who came and went when deliveries were made, how the shadows moved as the sun dipped behind the Pacific. What struck them most? The absence of police. Not once did a squad car patrol the area. It was like the bank had been forgotten. Except by them. The only real obstacle was the bank's alarm-allowed exterior clapper system. No wires, no central security, just noise. Dencio had a plan for that too, and when the time came, he executed it with surgical precision. On the night of the heist, the crew moved like phantoms. They stole a ladder from a local church and scaled the bank's rooftop. James and Emil climbed first. Phil stood guard with a shotgun. The rest of the crew packed burlap sacks with garden dirt tools to muffle explosions. First, they neutralized the alarm. Liquid styrofoam sprayed into the clapper chamber, hardening instantly and silencing the bell. Then came the drilling. They cut a square into the roof right above the vault. Every motion choreographed, every movement silent. Inside the vault's ceiling, they planted 6 sticks of dynamite. To deaden the blast, they buried the explosives under sandbags. Still, this was the most dangerous part. The dynamite was unstable, filled with nitroglycerin. If even one stick misfired, the entire crew could be vaporized, but the fuse burned clean. The charges blew perfectly. No one heard a thing. With the hole blown and the rebars cut using an acetylene torch, the crew descended into the vault. There, hundreds of safe deposit boxes waited, but Dencio wasn't opening them at random. He had a list box numbers whispered from Hoffa's connections. Box 161, Box 197, Box 212. The first one they cracked open contained neat stacks of $100 bills. About $2 million. The second had even more. By the time the sun began to rise, they'd barely scratched the surface. They had to go. They'd patched the hole in the roof with plywood and tar. From their condo, they watched. No police, no activity. No sign the bank even knew it had been robbed. The next night, they returned. This time, Dencio brought the entire crew into the vault. Time was running out. If they wanted to hit all 500 safe deposit boxes, they had to move fast. Hammering, prizing, sorting. It was a controlled frenzy, until Chuck's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie. A car had just pulled into the lot. The cleaning crew. They froze. Not a breath, not a footstep. The janitors unlocked the front door, did a quick sweep, and left, never realizing they'd walked right above a multi-million-dollar crime in progress. By Monday morning, 458 boxes had been emptied. The robbers slipped away like smoke. But before they left, Dencio did one last thing. He shattered the vault's timing mechanisms and locked the heavy door shut. The bank wouldn't even be able to get inside until someone noticed something was off. When the staff arrived, panic followed. Authorities were called, but no one, not the local cops, not the sheriff, could understand why a sleepy suburban bank had been targeted so expertly. Then the FBI got involved. Special agents Paul Chamberlain and Frank C. were assigned. What they found inside shocked even seasoned investigators. Scattered sandbags, melted lockboxes, and almost zero fingerprints. The burglars had cleaned up after themselves with surgical care. But the biggest mystery remained. Why this bank? And why now? The FBI didn't know it yet, but they were already racing against ghosts. Dencio and his crew were long gone $12 million richer, and they had no intention of stopping. But just when it seemed they'd pulled off the perfect crime, a small oversight from one crew member would spark a chain reaction. And soon the FBI would have their first lead, one that would unravel everything. Was almost perfect, but almost was the one thing that separated legends from fugitives. And for Emil Dencio and his crew, the ghost trail they thought they'd left behind was about to start glowing red hot. It began quietly. 2 weeks after the heist, while most of America was still unaware that $12 million had silently vanished from under the president's nose, a different branch of the FBI hundreds of miles away in Ohio noticed something strange. In the small town of Lordstown, a local bank had been burglarized. No forced entry, no alarm tripped. The vault? Blasted clean through the ceiling, sandbags scattered like confetti. It was surgical, professional, and eerily familiar. The Cleveland office picked up the phone and called Los Angeles. Agent Paul Chamberlain felt the chill the moment the call came through. "They used sandbags?" he asked, his voice flat. "Explosives through the vault roof?" "Exactly," came the answer. "Same setup, same tools, same silence." And just like that, the FBI had a breadcrumb. The Cleveland field team shared a list of known suspects operating in the Midwest, with experience in this kind of job around 100 names. One of them was a man they'd chased for years but never caught. Always close, always one step ahead. Emil Dencio. When Chamberlain ran the name against flight records, his breath caught. There it was, Emil Dencio, James Dencio, Harry Barber, Chuck Mulligan. All had flown into Los Angeles just days before the Laguna Niguel job, and they hadn't even bothered using aliases. Arrogance, confidence, or maybe just the belief that they were truly untouchable. But now the Bureau had them. What they didn't have yet was evidence. The first plan of attack traced their movements. Chamberlain and Agent Frank C. began combing taxi logs, interviewing drivers, pressing hotel staff for recognition. It was slow work, but a break came when one cabbie recognized Dencio's face and recalled something odd. "They tipped me $100, the man said. "Told me to forget I ever saw him." That was enough for Chamberlain to dig deeper. They canvassed every hotel and motel across the South Coast. Big chains. Boutique inns? Nothing. Then they got lucky. A manager at a small, sun-faded place called Jubilee Inn in Cudahy finally recognized a name. Chuck Mulligan had checked in under his real identity. They'd pulled the room's phone records. One number stood out, Earl Dawson, Tustin, California. On paper, Dawson seemed clean, but he was from Youngstown, the same gritty hometown as the Dencio crew. When the FBI visited him, Dawson admitted Mulligan had visited his home twice. Once to store a car in his garage. The agents rushed to get a warrant, and when they popped the trunk, a thief's toolkit. Gloves, crowbars, a hammer with a spiked end, detonator wires, a welding torch, even a shotgun. But it wasn't just the tools. It was the prints, Emil Dencio's prints. Now they had probable cause. With the car tied to the robbery and the phone call linking them to the area, the Bureau backtracked again to the condo near the golf course in Laguna Niguel. The same one where the crew had watched the bank from a half-mile away. The unit had been wiped clean. No receipts, no blueprints, no tools, no trace of anything. until one agent ran a gloved hand inside the dishwasher. Unwashed plates. They took them in, ran tests. And when the fingerprint results came back, gold, Emil Dencio, James Dencio, Chuck Mulligan, Harry Barber, all of them. The ghosts had finally left a footprint. On June 27, 1972, Emil Dencio walked out of his modest home, headed for his car, likely dreaming of ways to spend what was left of his cut. Maybe Vegas, maybe Europe, maybe nothing but silence and luxury. He didn't get far. 12 unmarked cars surrounded him, guns drawn, badges up. The illusion shattered in an instant. Inside his house, they found what you'd expect from a man who just stole millions cash, stashed in hollowed-out books, stuffed behind dressers, and rolled into socks. Not neat, not clever, just rushed. The others were rounded up quickly after. But one man, one wild card would change everything. Charlie Brokaw, the volatile thief from Cleveland who had been part of the job, who helped open Nixon's secret boxes, who knew exactly what they'd done and who they'd done it to, and who didn't want to rot in a federal prison. When the prosecutors offered him a deal, Brokaw took it, full immunity in exchange for full testimony. And when he spoke, he gave them everything. The details of the planning, the flight, the rooftop, the alarm phone, the safe deposit boxes, the money, the true owner of that slush fund. He even described the look on Dencio's face when he opened Nixon's box and saw the sea of green staring back at him. It was, Brokaw said, the only time I ever saw Emil smile like a kid. And just like that, the dominoes fell. James Dencio got 15 years. Emil Dencio, Chuck Mulligan, and Harry Barber were each sentenced to 20. Brokaw walked free. As the gavel slammed down, there was a hush, the kind of hush that only comes when a courtroom realizes it's been sitting on top of something rotten and radioactive. Most Americans would never learn the full truth that millions of dollars, traced back to campaign slush funds, had vanished in a robbery so clean it nearly changed history. And the man who made it all happen, he didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. He didn't escape to Mexico. He didn't end up in a beachfront villa sipping whiskey. He ended up in a jumpsuit, steel bars, cold food, and a legend that would only grow with time. But something strange lingered. According to the final reports, the crew only stole around $12 million. But Nixon's stash was rumored to be over $30 million. That left a question hanging in the air like thick fog. Where was the rest? Had it already been moved? Was the information from Hoffa wrong? Or more chilling, had Dencio and his crew taken more than they ever admitted? When agents combed through Vegas casino records, they found something curious. Dencio had walked into one of the city's most discreet casinos and exchanged nearly $500,000 in chips, then gambled exactly 3.5% of his winnings before cashing out. It was classic money laundering, but the scale? Insane. That kind of move takes connections, serious underworld ones. And there was only one man who could have greased those wheels. Jimmy Hoffa. If that trail were followed, if the cash trail from Nixon's vault to Hoffa's money washers in Las Vegas were ever publicly exposed, the fallout would have been explosive. Not just for Dencio, but for the entire presidency. Maybe that's why, to this day, parts of the case remain sealed. Maybe that's why no journalist has been able to fully piece together what happened in those vaults. Maybe that's why the names of some safe deposit box owners were never released to the public. Because this wasn't just a robbery. It was a warning shot, a glimpse at the cracks in the system, a reminder that even the president's money isn't safe from the reach of the right kind of thief. And still, whispers remain. Some say Dencio hid a portion of the take somewhere in the California desert. Others claim Hoffa had him stash it in offshore accounts through fake corporations. And there's even a rumor, wild but persistent, that one of Nixon's boxes wasn't full of money at all, but something far more valuable. Something that never made it onto any FBI inventory list. And maybe that's why Dencio never talked. Not once. Not in trial. Not in prison. Not on his deathbed. Whatever he saw in that vault, he took it to the grave. But what if he left something behind? Because somewhere, maybe deep in a storage locker or buried in a safety deposit box of his own, is a clue, a key, a map, or a message. And if someone finds it, the story isn't over. Not yet. Sometimes a silence is louder than any confession. For decades, that silence belonged to Emil Dencio. Even after the handcuffs, even after the trial, even as the years ticked away behind concrete walls and razor wire, he never spoke. Not about the money. Not about Hoffa. And definitely not about the safe deposit box he opened that night, the one he never reported to the rest of his crew. The one that wasn't filled with cash, because what was inside wasn't meant to be found. The FBI closed the case in late 1972, proudly marking it as one of the greatest recoveries in Bureau history. Publicly, they claimed victory. Privately, they knew they had only scratched the surface. Yes, they had recovered some money. Yes, they had made arrests. But there were holes they couldn't explain. Unanswered questions. Fingerprints that didn't match the six-man crew. A seventh person who was never named. And most disturbing of all, the quiet intervention from men in suits who weren't part of the investigation, men who arrived at FBI headquarters in black government cars with no identification, who demanded access to the vault's remaining contents before agents could fully document the scene. The only word ever whispered? Langley. Even Special Agent Paul Chamberlain once, so confident in his pursuit of justice, began to question what they had really uncovered, because the truth was darker than anything he'd prepared for, darker than theft, darker than betrayal. What Dencio and his crew had stumbled into was a political time bomb, one that would echo through the shadows of history and eventually claim lives. 3 years after his sentencing, Emil Dencio was moved to a medium-security prison in Illinois for behavioral good standing, but insiders said otherwise. The rumor was that Dencio had something the government wanted kept quiet. Something they were willing to buy with small comforts. His prison file was sealed, access restricted. Even some of his correspondence was blacked out before it left the facility. Yet he never wrote about the robbery, never mentioned Hoffa, never touched politics. Until one letter changed everything. It was dated February 12, 1977. Addressed to his nephew Harry Barber, who had just been released early for good behavior. The letter was short, handwritten in block letters, and filled with veiled warnings. If they ever come asking, say you don't know. If they mention the tapes, hang up. If I disappear, tell no one. The truth doesn't need to be told. It just needs to stay buried. Barber burned the letter, but not before making a single critical copy. He never knew why he made that decision, until someone tried to kill him. It happened just after midnight on a lonely stretch of I-80 in Nevada. Barber had been working odd jobs in Reno, staying clean, keeping his head down. But on that night, a dark sedan began tailing his car. Lights off, no plates. Barber noticed it just in time to swerve off the road. The sedan didn't stop. It rammed his car from behind, sending it tumbling down an embankment. Barber broke 3 ribs and blacked out. When he came to, the sedan was gone, and so was the briefcase he kept in his trunk. Inside that briefcase, the copy of Amel's letter. It hadn't been an accident. Someone was watching. Meanwhile, in Dencio's prison, the strange activity escalated. One morning, guards entered his cell and found him unconscious on the floor, his eyes open, body cold, heart stopped. The official report claimed it was a stroke, but the autopsy was inconclusive. No family was allowed to claim the body. He was buried in an unmarked grave, under heavy surveillance for weeks after. The files were sealed again, case closed, loose ends clipped. Except one. Barber, now fully convinced someone was trying to erase history, began investigating on his own, quietly, patiently. He started reaching out to people who might know why that $30 million haul had been protected with such violence. One name kept resurfacing, a man no one could confirm existed, a deep-cover operative with ties to Nixon's re-election committee and CIA front operations in Latin America. Code name, Indigo. According to whispers in Hoover-era intelligence circles, Indigo had been involved in financial black operations, moving dark money across borders, laundering campaign funds, and hiding politically dangerous materials in unlikely places. One of those places, a safe deposit box in Laguna Niguel, the same box Emil Dencio opened alone before calling the rest of the crew. Barber realized something terrifying. They didn't just steal money. They stole something they weren't supposed to see. Something far worse. Back in Washington, a young journalist named Tanya Royce had been compiling documents through a series of FOIA requests. Her goal was to write a book on Nixon-era political corruption. What she found instead chilled her. Redacted memos, internal CIA communications, tape logs from Nixon's private San Clemente residence that mentioned bank asset shielding and civilian operatives. But most notably, one chilling line from a 1971 memo marked eyes only. If the deposit vaults are breached, immediate containment protocol. Silence operatives, retrieve tape, deny all knowledge. No exposure. Tanya started digging deeper. She filed more requests. Then one day, while walking to her car, she was hit by a city bus that had mysteriously swerved onto the sidewalk. She died on the spot. The police ruled it an accident. But the journalist who inherited her notes, her friend Marcus Lee, knew better. He disappeared 2 weeks later. His apartment? Ransacked. His laptop? Gone. Tanya's research? Erased. Barber, now in his 60s, went underground. He moved from state to state, using burner phones and aliases. But he kept the investigation alive. Then, in 1994, he received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a VHS tape and a single note. You were right. Keep this safe. It's not just money. He'd played the tape once in a remote cabin in Colorado. It was grainy, black and white. Surveillance footage from inside the United California Bank vault. The camera must have been hidden inside the ceiling. It showed Dencio, alone, opening one particular safe deposit box. The expression on his face wasn't greed. It was horror. He pulled out a thick envelope, then another. Then what looked like a set of audio cassettes. One had a red X on it. And then he stopped moving, frozen. His lips moved. He said something, repeated it, over and over. Barber rewound the footage, leaned closer. Dencio was whispering, "We weren't supposed to see this. We weren't supposed to see this. Years passed. The VHS was hidden. The people involved either vanished, were imprisoned, or died. Until 2003. That's when Barber re-emerged, this time publicly, at a true crime symposium in Austin, Texas. He took the stage, gray, gaunt, and clearly afraid, but determined. He told the audience the story of the heist, the tapes, the lies, the missing millions. And then he paused. "I don't have proof," he said, "because every time proof surfaces, someone disappears." The room was silent. "I'm not telling you this to go viral. I'm telling you this because I might not be here tomorrow." That night, he checked into a hotel under a fake name. The next morning, the fire alarm went off at 5:43 a.m. The entire third floor was engulfed in flames. No body was recovered, only ashes, and a scorched key labeled Box 217. In 2005, the United California Bank building was demolished. The new owners turned the lot into a commercial plaza. But during excavation, construction workers unearthed a long-forgotten access tunnel behind what used to be the vault. Inside, they found a broken ladder and a scorched metal box. It was marked 217. The LAPD took possession of it and passed it to the FBI. But just like that, it vanished. No inventory, no report, gone. But whispers never die. A retired agent from the original case, now on his deathbed, spoke to a podcaster in 2018. He refused to name names, but he said this: "We didn't find all the money. We weren't supposed to. And the worst thing they took wasn't green. It was blackmail. The tapes, the box, the letters, if real, could implicate more than Nixon. They could implicate entire networks of covert government activity, foreign assassinations, domestic surveillance, voter manipulation, and it had all been hidden in a sleepy California town, in a small bank no one was supposed to look twice at, until a poor kid from Ohio, chasing a dream of getting rich, cracked it open. Today, the story is mostly forgotten. Most people have never heard of Emil Dencio, or Jimmy Hoffa's grudge, or the $30 million Nixon stash. The files are buried. The evidence is locked behind layers of bureaucracy. The truth scattered across burned letters, dead men's secrets, and missing boxes. But if you stand in the right parking lot in Laguna Niguel, under the right slant of California's sun, you can almost see the outline of what used to be there. A vault, a silence, a secret, still breathing. And somewhere out there, maybe in an old safety deposit box, or a forgotten storage locker, or a USB flash drive mailed to the wrong address, is the final key, the last piece. The bang no one was ready for, because this wasn't just a robbery, it was a surgical cut into the chest of American secrecy. And if that scar ever opens again, the truth will come pouring out, like blood,